Welcome everyone to our 10th edition of the Thank God It's Monday webinar series. We already have 10, we've been on 10 weeks in a row. So if you've been following us, you will have noticed that in past webinars, the idea that the world needs a sort of consciousness revolution has kept popping up over and over. So today we've decided to make this the central topic of our discussion. And to do that, we have with us Helen Eriksen. Helen is an economist. She's a business psychologist, an international speaker, and author of several books, one of them entitled Change Doesn't Ask for Permission, which is something that humanity has learned the hard way in the last few months. Helen, thanks for accepting Christine's invite to be with us today.
Pleasure.
So let's start. Let me start with this intriguing book. Why did you write Change Doesn't Ask for Permission?
I wrote it because I had been working a lot with organizations internationally, and when we were working together, for example, also different cultures together, what became clear to me is that we so need to have a common language about what is it actually psychologically that is moving us behind the scenes. What are the subconscious patterns for us to actually become still more conscious about why are we doing what and why are we not always actually behaving, acting in the ways we would like to do? Why do we sometimes actually do this 2 steps forward, 1 step back? So it was because I really wanted to support organizations becoming more conscious about their cultures and how they can actually, by being more conscious to a far higher degree, actually they themselves see their intentions becoming alive.
That's interesting. I guess that's why Christine left also an intriguing question for you. Christine Engvik is the one that actually invited you to be with us today. And before she left, she asked a question for you that I'm gonna transfer you right now, which was kind of interesting because her question, and actually listening to you, that starts making sense. She asked why, she asked, do you think change happens by chance, or this thing we call serendipity is just part of the evolutionary process? So what do you say to that?
That's a very, very interesting question. I don't know whether anybody is able to answer that question in this lifetime. I'll do my very best. My sense has become studying biology, studying nature, studying the body, studying ecosystems, studying quantum physics and economics too, that the impression I'm left with is that it seems to be such an intelligent universe that we are living in, where everything is interconnected and entangled, that it would be in many ways strange if something happened by accident only. It seems to be woven into the cloth of life, that when something needs to emerge and the system calls for it, it'll simply emerge. So I, over the years, have become more a believer in serendipity than in that the majority of what we experience actually happened by chance.
So would you say that everything that happens is just perfect, and even though we see something as a catastrophe, in fact there's a reason for it behind it, and actually it's just that our perspective doesn't allow us to see why the perfection behind it? Is that what you're saying?
If I could reframe my big role model is the body, the human body. I think if we look at the human body, which is very, very, very physical, I think we have a perfect blueprint for actually understanding most of what's going on around us. Also, why does what emerge when? And when we look at the body, what we look at as being terrible symptoms that's the way we would initially interpret them, is when we look a bit deeper, has actually been signaling for years. It's just actually accumulated when it finally becomes a disease. So in that sense, I think the planetary system on a macro scale, macrocosmos scale, down into the microcosmos scale, is so highly intelligent, as is the body, that when it emerges, it's been on its way a long way. We just haven't been sensitive enough to actually interpret the signals in time.
Mm-hmm. Actually, what you're saying now reminds me of a conversation I had with Salim Ismail, one of our previous guests. He has this theory that luck, which is a form of chance, right, is a measure of consciousness and interconnectedness. He says that you can tell how the level of consciousness behind something or somebody is can be demonstrated by the amazing luck that happens to that person. And it's, in a way, the way he describes that luck has to do with this sense of interconnectedness that you were describing before, that everything is connected in ways that we don't understand. Just before you talked about the connection between quantum physics and economics, we don't know much really about how the world operates, how the universe operates. And Salim actually says, in different words, but he basically says what you're saying, that luck, in fact, he's studying these connections between luck and the level of consciousness. Does this resonate with you?
It does resonate with me, but I would like to add something, if I may.
Sure.
What I would like to add is, I also think that intention is very important, because intention is another way of saying focus. And we mostly see what we focus on. So I think intention and focus is important. And then I also would like to add responsibility, our ability to respond, going along with focus, because if we are not able to respond sensitively to what's going on, and from our both brain halves, both the analytical and our wholeness brain half, I think there's a lot that we don't see, we don't interpret, we are not able to make sense of. We actually don't notice it, and then suddenly we call it, and it happened once of a sudden, which it so did not. It's actually an accumulated effect over probably years.
Mm-hmm. I heard you talk before about intuition. And I think that in the current times of crisis, intuition might be a better sort of GPS than intelligence to navigate through this crisis. What's your intuition about it?
Well, those are just my words, actually, because I think we've been doing, at least till now, we think fairly well by using actually mostly our left brain, our current economic paradigm. The growth paradigm is very much determined from our left brain half. What I think we need is exactly this new GPS, namely a whole brain, which is the infrastructure for our intuitive intelligence. And if one then would be thinking, well, we've got 9 already, according to other people, other psychologists, then what I think is important about the intuitive intelligence is this, that it's the only intelligence, from what we know, with which we can overview complexity. And one of the ways of defining the intuitive intelligence is our ability to make constructive decisions from an insufficient amount of information, which is just and simply the reality for almost every human being on this planet today and onwards. So I'm not sure that I'm actually completely sure that we won't be getting very far without this new GPS. And also, I could imagine there's a reason why we've got two brain halves and not only one half. So I think it's really about joining forces of our brain halves, which also on a cultural scale will also join many other beautiful forces, so that we'll be able to go from a separated way of looking at it, a duality way of looking at it, to a more holistic way of looking at it, which I also notice when I look around and the tendencies in the world, the upcoming trends. That's what everything is about. And also, I would say what the corona crisis has taught us, namely how enormously, also life-confirmingly interconnected our planet and all its structures are.
Is this this connectedness pattern that you're observing a sort of a new paradigm that at some point might actually replace the old paradigm of growth? I mean, it is true that this old paradigm of growth has created a lot of wealth, but it is also true that it's been unable to distribute this wealth evenly. Do you think that bringing in interconnectedness into the equation and creating a new paradigm that pivots around connectedness, we may end up actually forgetting about the old paradigm of growth and having and living in a more egalitarian world?
Yes, I certainly do. And my impression is that if we look at how we've been developing on an evolutionary scale, interconnectedness has been the roadmap all along. It's just that on a microcosm scale, as a human being, when we develop psychologically in our various national cultures, we are very much tribal in our ways of looking at it. And I think that what we'll see is that the interconnectedness we see in nature, the interconnectedness we see in the body, it's been there all along. And now what's happening is that all the threats from all the living systems phenomena on this planet, they are coming together. So that what we are seeing now is that so much bridging is going on in a life-confirming way. Not that it's necessarily and will necessarily be easy, because we all have our biases, what is right, what is wrong, what is white, what is black. But I think we are getting there. And the corona crisis, I think in many ways has helped us creating a critical mass, so that, which means majority of impulses, so that we have an excellent springboard now to actually create a new paradigm of interconnectedness, which I think would also include economies which are more circular, distributive, regenerative, because that is actually the natural force of life on this planet, if we let it, when it's not only about short-sighted income or to actually earn a lot of money and accumulate wealth, but actually see it in a distributive way of living, sharing. So I think what we are bridging now is exactly the growth paradigm into a paradigm of interconnectedness.
That's really interesting, and I think that connecting these with the coronavirus crisis that you also mentioned before, when we were discussing about the topic of today's session, you suggested that what stands out in the middle of this context of obviously unsolicited change that we're living all in, you mentioned that this is a great opportunity to foster a revolution in consciousness, which actually is the main topic of our discussion today. Why do you think that this is an opportunity to foster a revolution of consciousness?
Because very often when we look at not only our evolution, but historical peaks where something changed, the Renaissance, etc., what it takes is a critical mass. It takes a majority of people who somehow sense, interpret what is experienced in similar ways. And what the Corona crisis brought us was that internationally we followed each other. What's going on in Germany, in China, in Brazil, in New Zealand, in Australia, on the Faroe Islands, all over the world. We were singing, we were looking at the numbers, and we were finding out that we are all in it together. Everyone is in this together. You can't flee to another planet. This is the planet we have. And it made it so visible that this is the planet we have. And we actually have to take really, really good care of how we move, how we measure, how we take responsibility or not. And so critical mass, as I look at it, was created due to those life-death existential conditions we've been living in for almost half a year. And one knows from psychological research that the more intense we experience something, the more our neural pathways will be influenced by it, the more our ways of thinking and feeling and interpreting will be influenced by it. And the more, said in other words, our consciousness will be influenced by it. So we've had an enormous impact due to life and death conditions in a very short time. And those impactful experiences have been very, very much about interconnectedness. So that is why this very finely intertwined cloth, interwoven with interconnectedness, consciousness, we are all in this together. I think it's taken a quantum leap during the last 3 to 4, 5 months, really.
So I would agree with you. Now, it's taken a few months to build up this sense of connectedness. I agree that a window of opportunity has opened up and that we now see clearer things that probably we didn't see before. But now I'm playing devil's advocate. I would challenge you whether as long as this has taken months to open up, it can just close up in 2 or 3 days if we don't react quickly to it. What do you think?
Yeah, I look at it as a window of opportunity too. I would not be so hopeful if I hadn't been working with so many international organizations over the years, experiencing with these CEOs and all these advisory boards, how the tendency of interconnectedness has accumulated over the years, that sustainability is not just something that's turning up like during this crisis, or consciousness, interconnectedness. It's been on its way for a long time. I would say like maybe 4 decades or something like that. So, and that is not at all a guarantee that it'll not disappear or at least diminish, or the curve will slow down a little. It's just that I think because of life and death, something happens to human beings when they are on this edge of, will I live, will I die? When you see it also in personal lives, people are more opening up to other ways of maybe looking at life quality, changing their lives when they are in this, will I live, will I die? So I could hope, it's only a hope, but I could really hope, and I'm pretty actually also convinced that it'll not disappear like that, because we are too many who have been creating critical mass together and also have been living lives with our families during this crisis, having had to change our habits, so that I think far more things have actually changed, which seems like in small ways. But when we look at the whole picture, actually have accumulated, so that the bigger picture, it's my both my hope and also my intuitive sense that it has lifted and created a critical mass to a degree that it's not that we can't go back, but we will be more, I think, what is that word? We'll the critical mass is just so strong that it's become I think, a general force.
Yeah, and actually, now that you say this, I'm thinking that probably one thing that demonstrates that you're actually right, that we are evolving in consciousness and we're more open to what you're saying, is the fact that we see things happening that were completely unthinkable just a few decades ago. For instance, this incredible Black Lives Matters movement that has just exploded like anything after one person got murdered. Before, dozens of people were murdered on a daily basis in the US. I remember 30 years ago, that was happening almost every day. Yeah. Now, just once, and it triggers these incredible riots. We see all those movements defending against climate change, defending the environment, and how quickly they go viral, right? So do you think that this sense of connectedness that you were describing is what actually empowers all these movements to go viral so quickly? Also empowered by technology as well, but technology, like somebody said, is consciousness externalized, right? So what's your opinion on that?
My opinion is that it's actually an interesting example, because again, I think it's this critical mass. It's been accumulating over years, this what is happening now, and suddenly there was one, if you will, trigger. Not to underestimate the tragic circumstances, etc. They are terribly tragical. It's just that I think it's a reaction of critical mass, again, accumulated incidents over the years, and then if you then in the equations have plus interconnectedness plus the technology for it to go viral, then you have what we see today. And I think this is just the beginning of that. We will see far more reactions like that, also regarding climate, regarding wealth accumulation, regarding many important aspects of being alive on this planet, how to actually see to that we create circumstances in which it's well-being, which is in focus, and also the interconnectedness. And so I think we'll see it all over the planet, this critical mass showing its as a phenomenon, showing its face in very many different areas of life. Could be school systems, could be in healthcare, could be how we treat people in homes for elderly people. I think it's in very many areas.
I'm wondering to what extent this is actually causing a slow rewiring of our brain, in the sense that until now we've been dominated by a brain that's been basically under the command of the amygdala, which is what triggers our fear system, and basically we've been reacting to any type of threat in the past with this kind of fear-based response, the fight or flight response. I'm wondering to what extent the fact that we are evolving in this direction, it also responds to some sort of rewiring of our brain. We cannot notice it at a personal scale probably, but if we could look at a if we could actually see how humanity as a whole has been evolving over the course of the last, say, 200 years, it would look like we are becoming more and more conscious. And then that would totally resonate with your words that we are in the middle of a consciousness revolution, and actually COVID-19 is acting as an accelerator. So we've talked about this this view at a personal level. What does this all mean from an organizational perspective? What are, since you're in the world of business, coaching other business leaders, what do they tell you? What kind of new management trends do you envision that we can expect in the near future? Do things like self-organization or other things like that most companies are starting to adopt will become the new normal?
I think in many companies, self-organization has been a new normal for quite a while. Definitely not all over the place, but in many organizations and still more. And what always happens when you have a crisis, either it becomes very much top down, and it can be an either or an and, but it can be top down, and then it can also be it'll have to happen so quickly and in ways that we are not used to actually operating. So we have to set free our potential, our workforce, and then allow them to organize themselves. And what I've heard from employees, from CEOs, from leading physicians in university hospitals is that this is exactly what has been happening, that they had to set free the resources. And then it was incredible to see how the workforce organized itself very quickly in ways that previously would have taken far longer time, because several meetings would have to decide, but there wasn't time because it was about life and death. So they actually really spread out self-organization in ways that would previously have been impossible. And also the level of creativity, the level of well-being, the level of pride in their work has been rising, according to the CEOs I've been talking to and working with and coaching, giving advice. And what they also say is that, one said a bit laughingly as I'm doing it now, he said, I wonder what will happen to my job in a few years, or maybe only in a year's time or in a half year's time, because as he said, it is as if this new way of organizing has proven that maybe we should reconsider having all these levels, having all these hierarchies. Maybe we should do a bit more, as I also say from having studied the body and the biology of the body for so many years, that's an interesting way of self-organization, where we don't actually have leaders in a traditional way. Not that we should think that we won't have leadership in the future, but certainly I think a lot of contemplation, and also you're talking about neural pathways. I think a lot of contemplation has been done, reflection has been done, which is similar, has similar effect on the prefrontal cortex as meditation has. And from that we know that if we improve that part of the brain, it'll be able to actually say to amygdala, you don't have to be so afraid of new things. You don't have to go in regression mode to that high degree. Relax. It might not be that dangerous. It might actually be something that could serve us well. So yes, I think it's given us opportunity to really look at it closely, more quickly than we would have done without Corona.
That's a very interesting view. In fact, I was thinking as I was listening to you that probably we should find where the amygdala of organizations is and find out ways to bypass it and rewire the organizational brain. And actually, that leads us to our last question. We always ask this question to all our guests. How do you what does conscious capitalism mean to you? How do you think businesses should evolve going forward after this crisis?
I think, to me, conscious capitalism means a very important bridge, because we need a sensible bridge. The Danish philosopher Kierkegaard, Søren Kierkegaard, he said, you have to meet people where they are at. Meaning that when we are moving from a growth paradigm, which we for sure are, we need a bridge. And we need a bridge that can actually bridge, not that it's an artificial kind of thing that we think might work. And so conscious capitalism, I think, is actually a very important bridge from a growth paradigm to a paradigm of interconnectedness, a more distributive, regenerative, circular economy, and we need that bridge. I think conscious capitalism is a very important step and bridge. Yes.
Okay, so thank you very much, Helen. It's been really interesting having this conversation with you. Time flies and it's amazing, but we've already been talking for half an hour, so we don't have much time for anything else. So we're going to have to ask you our last and final question that we also ask all our guests, which is, who would you like us to interview next? Why and what would you like to ask him?
I would like to introduce you to Professor Alexander Schiffer. He's originally German. He lives in Geneva now with his wife, Dr. Ramamani, and they have together founded Home of Humanity, where they take students from maybe not all over the planet, but from a big part of the planet, among other places, University of St. Gallen, where Professor Alexander Schiffer is professor, and he's also professor in South Africa at the Leonardo da Vinci University. And he works with young people. He works with them to support them in pioneering as entrepreneurs for a more sustainable world.
Sounds good. And the specific question?
I would like to ask Alexander Schiffer, how can we, in the best possible way, from your point of view, support young entrepreneurs in becoming pioneers in this new interconnected paradigm of consciousness revolution and creating a more sustainable planet?
Sounds great. We'll make sure we ask him this question. That's for sure. Any final remarks before we go?
Not apart from that, it's been a great pleasure. Thank you very much, Xavier.
Well, thank you very much, Helen. And thank you very much to our audience. As a quick reminder, tomorrow we'll post this recording on YouTube. And next week, we'll be having Tom Hazlitt, who will join us to talk about impact investment and how purpose and collaboration are slowly replacing money and competition as the drivers of our economy. So thanks again for joining us, and hope to see you next Monday in another exciting edition of our Thank God It's Monday webinar series. Thank you.